This video is proudly sponsored by DigimonCard.io for all your Digimon card, deck building, deck list, card pricing, and discussion needs.
Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a top 16 breakdown for the Carta Magica Digimon Ultimate Cup that happened this past weekend. It was 260 players, 7 rounds of Swiss, and it ended with this top 16 that we see here today. And real quick before we get started, one shout outs to Carta for giving me the list to give to you guys, as well as for running this event. As well as if you guys enjoy these videos and these breakdowns, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. I'm on the road right now. This is Thanksgiving week and I'm technically on vacation, and I did this breakdown as well as the Top Cut one that I did earlier today. So it was a not trivial amount of work, and if you guys do appreciate that work that goes into it, a like and subscribe would go a long way. Anyways, going into this top 16, we do see 4 MetalGaruru X, 4 security controls, 2 Hydramons, 2 yellow hybrids, an Examon, which ended up winning the event, a Dorbick, a WarGreymon X, and a Mastemon. So compared to the Top Cut event that we also did coverage for, this is a little bit more diverse for the archetypes, and we do see a couple of more EX3 archetypes too, which is really interesting to see. So honestly, I just wanted to kind of jump on into it. So we're going to start off with Tev Anderson's first place Examon. Starting off, we have Tev Anderson's first place Examon, and this was an archetype that I was cautiously optimistic for the EX3 format. There's just a lot of kind of cool archetype things and just mechanics this deck has. It's kind of like a combination of like Mastemon and like Black War Gray, in the sense that you do have like this kind of multicolor DNA stuff that you get to do, but also the big end goal is to get this big Examon that kind of functions like a Black WarGreymon, where it has protection with the evade mechanic, as well as instead of a Black WarGreymon being able to swing into unsuspended stuff, this deck forces your opponent to attack, and then you can block it and get the benefits from it there. So really cool, and some decks strictly can't function if there's an Examon on the other side of the board, just with how it works and the functionalities for it. And I think that is something really important for like this to consider for it. I would normally say this is kind of like the gatekeeper for the format, in the sense that if you can't get rid of the Examon, or if you don't have an answer to your opponent establishing one, then you are going to have a bad time. Though there are just some consistency issues with a deck like this too, and I do like a couple of the techs that Tev added to this in my mind. The Hydramon Dragon Mode is a really interesting one. Not only is it a level 6 that's also blue and green, which means that if you're trying to do your DNA plays, it can be functioned as either one, which I think is important. But there are some cool things where you do get to play the level 4s for free, which can be like a Hydramon, which lets you draw 2, or the other Hydramon, which is just a blocker as well. You obviously lose the inheritable for it, but I think that's really an interesting tech choice, and it makes sense when looking at it too, again, being able to be so flexible with it. We see Icewall, we see the Avalon Gate as well, which is interesting. Megadeth is a very, very good card still, and then the Davis was... Why would you not play Davis in this deck? It pretty much searches every card in it, so I think that's very, very cool. But it is exciting to see Examon in pretty much the first kind of North American finish that I've seen, at least at a Ultimate Cup or kind of larger event, and I think that's very cool. So congrats again to Tev for their first place finish there. And next up we have Chris Sock's second place MetalGaruru X, and we've been seeing a lot of this archetype in general. We see pretty much this build. I think the only thing that I've noticed is that there's not the antibody Omni at the top end, which I've been seeing pretty consistently for a lot of the topping MetalGaruru lists for the last couple of weeks, at least since it was released in BT10. And I don't really have too much else to say. This is just a strong deck. I've made probably 100 different deck lists for this archetype in the last couple months, and they all look similar to this. This is definitely a list that if you are the best pilot in the room, you're playing this list and you're probably going to do a good job, and that is definitely what Chris Sock did for this event. So congrats to Chris on their finish there. And next up we have our third place list, which is Jordann Lasnier's third place Security Control. And Security Control, I think, has been a probably hardy staple for this meta for a long time too, especially since it can do good things against MetalGaruru X. And honestly, I think like the worst nightmare for Security Control is that mirror match, because not only do you, there's such a high possibility that it's going to be a tie, that not only do you get to not top, but the person you're playing against has a chance to not top too. So I think that is impactful. But the add of the new Venusmon, I think, is very strong. It is a very, very good Security Control card for us right here. as well as Death Examon, which is very good in its own right. The fact that like non-death X, like just it's been teched in for the last couple months for any deck that just wants a little bit of control aspects, and it still can just be dropped for cheap and win you the game because your opponent doesn't really have an out for it. For like something like more mid-range aggressive, this can just win you the matchup a lot of the time too. So I don't have a lot more to say about security control. It's kind of been sloping towards this kind of build here where we do have this yellow-purple mix here. You do have like your recycling of your security with Magna Aandroidd and cards like Flame Hellscythe, as well as the Avenge Kidmon to help cycle it back and make it so you do not get milled out sooner than your opponent. But anyways, congrats to Jordann on their finish there. Next up we have Ren's 4th place Hydramon list, and just to clarify, I've been calling just this whole archetype Hydramon just because it's the newer thing. Some don't even run it, some just still do the new Bloom Lord, but I'm gonna just say it's Hydramon because it's the new card, and there's just it's really weird that this deck has really 2 top end cards. But anyways, that aside, this deck has in general been doing a little bit better than have been expecting. I definitely thought it was gonna top some events, but it's been, I'd say, consistently topping from the release of EX3, and is probably the best archetype boost from EX3 that we've seen. So I think it's in a very, very good spot. Just the fact that you do now have some ways to interact with your opponent with the Palomino and the Hydramon is really, really good. Otherwise, like, you're kind of like a mid-range OTK list because you do OTK in a way, but it's just a little bit convoluted, and that Hydra adds some more kind of control aspects, and I think that can be really needed. And then the Bloom Lord is just kind of like the end of the game. It's just the way you finish the game, and it's a very strong way to do that. So some other text we see is just kind of like the Smashed Potatoes, which is essentially like a second copy of Hidden Potential Discovered. For the turn, next time you Digivolve one of your green Digimon from level 5 to 6, decrease the devolution cost by 4. So it costs 2, and if you Digivolve into a 4, you get the memory for a little bit cheaper, which is nice, but you cost 2 for it, so that is the reason for it. Which can be also impactful because if you go to your Hydramon, which is a 5 cost evolution, that can be impactful, and also the Grandale Soul, which not everyone's running, but is it's probably one of Green's best option cards, at least for a defensive or security bomb there. But again, congrats to Ren on their 4th place finish. And next up we have Cayden's 10th place Dorbickmon, and I can't 100% know what's going on with this 100. It's a very interesting build for this, and just Dorbickmon in general I think is one of my favorite cards from EX3, just because it is not only a strong card in its own right, but is a card that is going to be getting support for a long time in this game. If we have a couple more dragons or Soars or Sarahs, you can put these in that deck, and that's very strong. So there's obviously just a bunch of off-color, and by off-color I mean just like non-red dragons, Soars, etc. that are put into this list that gets some crazy interactions with it. For example, the Digivolving stuff, and this also gets to, well, this Digimon has an on-play effect, which this one does. Yeah, I believe this one does. You do get to get Security Attack +1. You get the Security Attack +1 off the Master Tyrannomon as well as the Greymon. All of these and the Volcanic Dramon. And if you have the Moduramon, when Digivolving, trash 1 card. Character inherited effect. When attacking once per turn, if your opponent has no Digimon with devolution cards in play, you get to unsuspend. So this is just a way that you can like do a one-hit KO with this, which is really strong. You have some tamers, you have some hybrids if you need to. You also have the Canon Weissmon, which is great because all turns this Digimon gains all effects of cards with Gammon in their names in this devolution sources. So for specifically this one, it's to get the Kaus, which is just this Digimon can't be blocked, which can be impactful as well. For some reason, if you hard cast this, you can go into the Majin, I guess, which is neat. It is a play that you can do. But this is just like you go into your big boy and then you just go off and you kind of do well there. We do have like the X antibodies as well, the Agumons that give the boost, and also the Jazzard, which lets you just look top forward for more dragons, which helps you there, and just gets the +1k. So all of this is really cool. It's kind of like a Dorbickmon version of, I'd say, like an ancient Ancient Greymon kind of build, which is interesting, and it's just cool to see that this list got 10th. So congrats again to Cayden on the finish there. There's probably a bunch of more synergies that I didn't touch there, but that is my quick overview. And again, congrats to Cayden. Next up, we have Michael's 12th place, WarGreymon X, my apologies. And this was an archetype that has been doing way better than I thought. And in my mind, like the reason I would say underrated it based on our experiences with it is that it's a deck that really didn't do much with the release of BT9. And it wasn't, and because of that, it wasn't on my radar immediately. But with all of the changes of the meta and also getting rid of the Alphamons as well as just all the other kind of changes that we've had with the restriction list, this is something that has been kind of creeping up and saying, you know what, I'm also a fairly strong list. Maybe I'm not as strong or consistent as Alphamon, but I can do essentially what that deck does. And since there's kind of like this vacuum because of it leaving, this is an archetype that's very, very strong. So, and especially since we are seeing, I'd say, a lot of security control decks, the BT1 WarGreymon is still a really, really good card, especially with all the DP boosts you get to do from it, as well as just the Agu X package is fantastic, and it just in flexibility for doing your Digivolution lines, as well as being able to add some protection, as well as just everything else with it. It's very, very strong there. And then we do have the X antibody. We have 2 Omnimons as well as the X antibody there, and just your kind of your tools. So I don't have much more to say. It's a pretty just kind of standard chain and line for it, but it's very, very strong when it goes off. And congrats again to Michael for their finish. And next we do have our 14th place Yellow Hybrid run by Duncan. And this is an archetype that really kind of got neutered early in the West for us, just because we got the limit of Jet Sylphimon to 1 with the release of BT9, and then we also have Sunrise Buster at 1, and is anything else got limited to 1 here? And Reinforcing Memory Boost. So this obviously is running 3 limited to 1 cards as it is, and it's still doing stuff just because of if he had to restrict all these cards, the deck was probably already pretty good, and the fact that it still can get some tops because despite that, I think just shows how good this was, and how much the limiting of kind of all of these cards are kind of warranted for it. But it's just great on what all this lets you do. It's especially since we're in this kind of the meta is a little bit slower, which means that it's very easy for you to set up a bunch of tamers, which means that you are able to get a bunch of memory off them, and then just kind of do your hybrids for game very, very quickly if your opponent's letting you. So that is just one of the most powerful things about this deck right now, and it's pretty consistent for setting up in my experience right now. It does kind of stink that we don't have the Jet Sylphies or just any kind of hybrid to Digivolve up for one of the Jet Sylphie to keep it your turn and then Digivolve a second time, but I think it is just a good spot still. And I don't know, like Yellow still just has like the best tamers. It has a bunch of great option cards as well, and it's almost like it's very, very easy to get a lot of advantage off of them hitting your security. And right now we're doing more of these mid-range hits into security instead of like everything all at once. Despite a deck maybe like MetalGaruru can still sometimes just win on the spot on like turn 3, and that kind of stinks. But besides that, I think there's a lot of decks that just would get punished by how good the security is and all the advantage you get from them hitting your security. So again, congrats to Duncan on their finish there. And to round out this video, this is Peng's 15th place Mastemon, and definitely looking like a Mastemon list with just how many one-ofs and such that are in it. And it is really nice to see Mastemon kind of creeping back into the meta right now. It's probably like the bottom of like tier 2 right now. It does get some occasional finishes, but there's just so much gas in this at the same time. It's so flexible in what you can do. It kind of can function as like a security control list if your security will let you. It sometimes lets you be a combo list. It sometimes lets you be a control list. Like there's just so much you can do. Sometimes you get to rush with Black Gato for game 2. It really lets you adapt your play style against what you're playing against, and if you're a strong player that knows what your deck does, your ratios, and you pick your ratios correctly, you can be into there's a lot of chance for success with it as well. So I don't really think there's anything too new from the BT10 or EX3. I don't think there's anything from this list. The probably newest card is the Jordann, and I've honestly yet to see this come out whenever I play the list or seen other people play the list, but it is still a really cool card in that regard. And I do like just, again, the flexibility that this list lets you do, and just all the synergies and combos that you can do. It's a very fun list, and again, congrats to Peng on their finish there. And that is going to be the end of this video. So again, thank you so much to Carta for giving me these lists to give to you guys. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you all next time.